On a quiet morning when the sun is still soft and the air smells faintly of damp earth, I like to walk to the edge of my garden with a cup of coffee. It's a ritual, a moment just for me to look over the little world I've built with my own two hands. Years ago, while wandering through Dollar Tree on an errand for dish soap, I spotted something that didn't seem important at first. A simple plastic trellis leaning shyly in the corner. It cost only $1, but in my mind, it was already a doorway to something beautiful. I imagined sweet peas curling around its frame or ivy spilling down in soft green ribbons. That trellis didn't just hold plants. It held the promise of transformation. Over the years, I've learned that beauty in the garden doesn't always come from big budgets or perfect plans. Sometimes it's born from a small idea, a bit of imagination, and a willingness to see possibility where others see plain plastic. Today, I want to share 20 ways you can turn these humble trellises into pieces of living art, each one carrying a little bit of your story. I still remember Mrs. Lambert, my neighbor from years ago, who tended a garden so fragrant you could smell it halfway down the block. She had a corner filled with sweet peas in every shade, soft pastels that seemed to sway in slow conversation with the wind. She once told me sweet peas are like people. Give them something to lean on and they'll reach higher than you expect. That stayed with me. A Dollar Tree trellis can be that gentle support. For this idea, start by choosing a light-colored paint, something soft like cream or pale sage, to give the trellis a vintage look. Spray paint works well and keeps the project easy on the hands. Once dry, place the trellis in a large pot or a raised container. This makes it perfect for those of us who don't want to bend down to tend plants. Plant sweet pea seeds or seedlings at the base, and as they grow, use soft garden ties or even strips of old fabric to guide their vines up the frame. The magic comes as the weeks pass. Sweet peas grow quickly, and soon you'll have cascading blooms that perfume your porch or patio. If bending to pick them feels difficult, the elevated setup allows you to snip a few stems easily for a vase indoors. You might notice how their tendrils curl tightly around the trellis, almost like little hands holding on. There's a quiet lesson there about resilience and connection. I once gave a trellis like this already planted with sweet peas to a friend recovering from surgery. She told me that watching those flowers open gave her something to look forward to each morning. It reminded her that even when you're still and healing, life can grow around you in ways you didn't expect. This project isn't just about growing flowers. It's about growing a daily moment of joy. Every time you catch their scent on the breeze, you might think of someone who gave you kindness or someone you once encouraged to grow. That's the real beauty of the sweet pea story trellis. It holds more than plants. It holds memories. Tomatoes have a way of making a garden feel generous. There's nothing like picking a sun-warmed tomato right from the vine and tasting the burst of sweetness. But for many of us, especially as we get older, the heavy cages and constant bending can make tomato growing less enjoyable than it used to be. That's where the Dollar Tree trellis comes in, not as a traditional cage, but as a lightweight, senior-friendly tomato tower that's just as sturdy without all the strain. The first time I tried this, I used 3 trellises, each one leaned inward slightly and tied together at the top with soft rope. It formed a kind of pyramid frame that felt both airy and stable. Because the trellises are so light, I could carry them and set them up without help. I placed the whole structure in the center of a large raised bed so the tomatoes could climb upward instead of sprawling on the ground. The beauty of this setup is how easy it is to maintain. Instead of reaching down to prune or pick, you work at waist height as the plants grow taller. The open design lets sunlight and air reach every side, which helps prevent disease. If you want to give it more charm, you can paint the trellises a cheerful red or deep green before assembling something that blends with your garden's personality. One summer, my granddaughter visited and helped me plant cherry tomatoes at the base of the tower. She was only 8. But she took such pride in checking the vines each week to see how many tiny green marbles had turned into ruby gems. By August, we were picking bowl after bowl together, laughing as she tried to eat more than she carried. The trellis didn't just hold tomatoes, it held those summer memories in place. If you've been avoiding tomatoes because the upkeep feels like too much, this project might change your mind. It's lightweight, easy to assemble, and just tall enough to make picking a pleasure again. And every ripe tomato you taste will be a reminder that sometimes the simplest tools and the simplest changes can bring back the joy of something you thought you'd outgrown. Not everyone has a sprawling backyard, but that doesn't mean you can't grow something fresh and fragrant right where you live. I learned this lesson years ago when I moved into a small apartment with a narrow balcony. Space was tight, but the craving for fresh herbs in my cooking never went away. That's when the idea for a trellis herb wall was born, and a Dollar Tree trellis turned out to be the perfect starting point. Begin by choosing a trellis size that fits your balcony wall or railing. Because balcony gardening often means dealing with limited floor space, this project uses vertical growing to your advantage. Lay the trellis flat and attach a row of lightweight hanging planters or small metal pails, also from Dollar Tree, using zip ties or S-hooks. Be sure they're shallow enough to keep the total weight manageable. Line each container with a bit of landscape fabric before filling with potting mix to keep soil from spilling out during watering. Now comes the fun part, choosing your herbs. For tea lovers, I recommend peppermint chamomile and lemon balm. For cooking, go with basil, thyme, rosemary, or parsley. Plant them close enough so that when they grow, the green leaves fill in the trellis spaces like a living tapestry. This arrangement keeps your herbs at eye and hand level, so no kneeling or bending is required. One of my fondest memories from this setup was the first time I made fresh mint tea in the morning. I stepped out barefoot onto the balcony, the city still quiet, and pinched off a few sprigs of peppermint. The leaves released their cool, sharp scent instantly, and by the time I poured hot water over them, my whole kitchen smelled like a summer garden. Over time, you'll find that an herb wall becomes more than a source of fresh flavor. It becomes a daily ritual. Whether you're snipping basil for pasta or rosemary for roasted vegetables, you're connecting with something alive and seasonal, even in the smallest space. And every time a neighbor walks by and says, "That smells amazing," you'll feel that quiet pride of turning an ordinary wall into a living, breathing pantry. There's a certain magic in walking under an archway of roses. The first time I experienced it was in a small countryside wedding garden, the kind where the air is thick with the scent of petals and the sunlight filters through clusters of blooms like stained glass. That memory stayed with me for years, and one day I decided to recreate a smaller, simpler version right in my own yard. All it took was 2 Dollar Tree trellises, a bit of creativity, and some climbing roses. For this project, choose a narrow pathway or the entrance to a garden corner. Position one trellis on each side, anchoring them securely in the soil or raised bed. You can even place them in large weighted pots if you're working on a patio. At the top, connect the 2 trellises with lightweight crossbars. PVC pipe painted to match works beautifully, forming a soft arch. This design keeps everything light enough to manage without heavy lifting. When selecting your roses, look for climbing or rambling varieties. I chose a blush pink climber called New Dawn for its gentle fragrance and soft color. In the first year, the plants will need a little guidance. Use soft garden ties to help them weave through the trellis grid. By the second summer, you'll be rewarded with cascades of blooms overhead. One of my favorite moments came when my sister visited and walked through the arch for the first time. She stopped mid-step, closed her eyes, and breathed deeply, saying it reminded her of our grandmother's garden. It struck me then this wasn't just an archway. It was a bridge between past and present. The beauty of this design is that it can transform even the smallest garden path into something extraordinary. It invites you to slow down, to pause for a moment under its canopy, and perhaps to remember the places and people who first taught you to love flowers. And in a world that rushes forward so quickly, a rose archway might be just the kind of gentle reminder we need to linger a little longer. There was a summer when my backyard felt just a bit too exposed. The neighbor's kitchen window overlooked my patio, and though they were lovely people, I longed for a space that felt more like my own. That's when I discovered the power of 3 Dollar Tree trellises, a few hinges, and the magic of seasonal decorating. Start by laying 3 trellises side by side on a flat surface. Using small outdoor hinges, connect them so they fold like a room divider. This makes the screen easy to move and store when not in use. You can paint them a neutral color to work with any decor, or leave them their natural shade and let the decorations change with the seasons. In summer, I wove silk greenery and bright faux flowers through the trellis openings, creating a lush wall behind my seating area. Come autumn, I swapped them for garlands of orange leaves, tiny pumpkins, and even a string or two of warm amber fairy lights. Winter brought evergreen branches, pine cones, and a soft dusting of artificial snow, while spring was all about pastel blooms and fluttering ribbons. One afternoon last fall, I sat outside with a blanket and cup of tea, the privacy screen glowing with little copper lights. A light breeze carried the faint scent of cinnamon from a candle on my table, and I remember thinking, this is my sanctuary. It wasn't just about blocking a view, it was about creating a backdrop that changed with my mood, and the seasons a reminder that beauty can evolve as life does. What I love most about this project is how personal it becomes. You can make it as bold or as subtle as you like using items that reflect your style or tell your story. And when the year comes full circle, folding it up and starting fresh feels a bit like turning the page to a new chapter in your garden story. One of the most enchanting corners of my garden appeared almost by accident. I had more cucumber seedlings than I had space for, so I decided to experiment with bending $2 tree trellises into an arch over my raised bed. What started as a practical way to give the vines more room turned into a shaded green tunnel that felt like stepping into another world. To create your own place, 2 trellises on opposite sides of a raised bed, arching them toward each other until their tops meet. Secure them with zip ties or lightweight wire where they touch. Because the trellises are light, this can be done without straining. You might only need a small step stool for the center connection. Plant cucumber seeds or seedlings along both sides of the bed, and as they grow, guide the vines upward with gentle ties. By midsummer, the tunnel will be a living canopy of broad green leaves and dangling cucumbers. The shade it casts makes it surprisingly pleasant to work underneath, even on hot days. I've found that it's also a perfect nook for a small chair, a spot to shell peas, sip lemonade, or simply watch the bees at work. One July afternoon, my grandson crawled into the tunnel to hunt for cucumbers. He emerged with one in each hand, grinning from ear to ear the way only a child can when they feel they've discovered treasure. That's when I realized the tunnel wasn't just functional, it was an experience. It drew people in, slowed them down, and gave them a reason to linger. This project is ideal for anyone who wants to maximize growing space while adding a touch of whimsy. And at the end of the season, the trellises can be taken apart and stored flat, ready to become something entirely new next year. It's proof that even the most practical solutions can turn into pure garden magic with a little imagination. Some evenings when the day's work is done and the sky begins to soften into dusk, I like to sit outside and watch the garden change its colors. That in-between time when daylight slips quietly into night is when a little bit of light can work wonders. A Dollar Tree trellis paired with a strand of solar-powered fairy lights can become a gentle glowing wall that turns any corner of your yard into a place of quiet magic. Start with a standard trellis wood or plastic will do and position it where you want the glow to be, whether that's behind a favorite bench at the edge of a patio or near a cluster of potted plants. Weave a string of outdoor fairy lights through the trellis grid, looping and draping them so the light catches in different places. Solar lights are ideal, especially if you prefer a soft, warm glow without the hassle of cords or outlets. For a layered effect, you can add a few trailing plants at the base, perhaps ivy petunias, or even faux garlands if you want year-round greenery. As the plants grow, the lights peek through the leaves like tiny fireflies caught in the vines. One summer evening, I hosted a small gathering for friends, and we sat beneath the light wall long after the plates were cleared. The fairy lights reflected in our glasses, and the conversation drifted easily between memories and dreams. Someone remarked that it felt like we were sitting inside a storybook. And in a way we were, because light has a way of turning ordinary spaces into places where moments linger. The best part: this project asks almost nothing from you once it's set up. The sun charges the lights by day, and each evening without fail they flicker on as if greeting you back to your own private little world. It's a reminder that even the smallest details can make a space feel loved and lived in. There was a winter a few years back when the cold seemed to stretch endlessly and the garden outside lay under a blanket of frost. I missed the sight of green so much that I decided to bring a little of it indoors. That's when a Dollar Tree trellis of all things became the centerpiece of my coziest corner. For this idea, choose a spot inside your home where you like to sit and unwind, maybe a reading nook by the window or a corner of your dining room. Stand the trellis upright in a weighted planter or secure it to a wall with removable hooks. Then gather a mix of trailing houseplants like pothos philodendron or string of pearls. Use soft ties to gently guide the vines upward and outward, letting some spill back down naturally. To make it even more inviting, weave a narrow strand of battery-operated fairy lights through the trellis before adding your plants. When lit in the evening, the trellis will glow softly, highlighting the leaves like little jewels. This setup doesn't just add greenery, it creates a sense of calm, like having a quiet garden tucked inside your home. One winter afternoon, I found myself sitting in that chair with a cup of chamomile tea, watching sunlight filter through the leaves. A neighbor dropped by, and as soon as she saw the plant wall, she paused mid-sentence. "It feels like spring in here," she said, smiling. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just decor. It was a mood lifter. The indoor plant corner screen is perfect for those who can't be outside as much as they'd like, whether due to weather mobility or simply a busy schedule. It brings a piece of the garden into your everyday life, reminding you that growth and beauty can thrive in any season, even when the world outside is resting. One of the greatest joys of gardening is the company it attracts. Birds with their curious eyes and fluttering wings bring a kind of life that can't be bought. I've always kept a feeder or two in the yard, but one year I decided to turn a Dollar Tree trellis into a dedicated bird feeding station, something both functional and lovely to look at. Start by anchoring the trellis in the ground near a window where you can easily watch the activity. If bending is a challenge, you can place the trellis in a large weighted pot on a table or raised platform. Using sturdy S-hooks or zip ties, attach a mix of small feeders at different heights. A shallow dish near the bottom can hold seed for ground-feeding birds, while hanging feeders above can attract finches, chickadees, and even the occasional hummingbird if you add a nectar bottle. To make the display even more appealing, plant a few bird-friendly flowers at the base. Think sunflowers, coneflowers, or black-eyed Susans. These not only provide extra food through seeds, but also create a natural, colorful frame for the trellis. Over time, you might notice butterflies joining the feast as well. One chilly morning last February, I sat by the window wrapped in a blanket, watching a bright red cardinal hop from one feeder to another. A pair of goldfinches soon joined in, their yellow feathers glowing against the bare winter branches. For a moment, it felt like the garden was alive again despite the frost. That little trellis had become a stage for nature's performances, changing with the seasons and never asking for more than a refill of seed. The beauty of this idea is how it brings the garden to you. Even on days when you can't be outside for long, the trellis keeps you connected to the rhythms of the natural world. A reminder that in every season, something beautiful is still taking flight. Gardens are places where we grow more than plants. They're where we grow memories. Years ago, while sorting through a box of old family photographs, I found a picture of my grandfather standing proudly beside his first vegetable patch. His straw hat tilted just so his smile wide and unguarded. I wanted that feeling in my garden too, the connection between past and present. That's when I turned a Dollar Tree trellis into a memory wall. Start by choosing a trellis that will stand securely where you want it, perhaps along a garden path near a seating area or beside a favorite flower bed. Laminate your photographs or place them in waterproof sleeves to protect them from the elements. Using small clothespins, clips, or even twist ties, fasten the photos to the trellis grid. Mix in handwritten recipe cards, pressed flowers, or little notes to make it even more personal. For an extra touch, weave in small strands of faux greenery or seasonal blooms, so the display blends naturally into the garden. You can also string a few battery-powered fairy lights through the frame to make the memories glow softly in the evening. The first time I put mine together, I invited my children and grandchildren over for a small picnic. As we walked through the garden, they stopped in front of the trellis, pointing at the pictures. "That's you?" my grandson asked, staring at a photo of me as a little girl holding a watering can twice my size. We spent nearly an hour there, swapping stories about the people and moments in those images. What makes this project special is how it transforms your garden into more than a place of beauty. It becomes a living scrapbook. Each time you pass by, you're reminded of the roots you've planted, not just in soil, but in the hearts and lives of those you love. And in a way, that trellis holds the most important kind of growth there is. Sometimes a garden needs a little separation, not to keep anything out, but to create distinct rooms that make the space feel larger and more inviting. Morning glories with their vibrant trumpet-shaped blooms are perfect for this. They grow quickly, cover beautifully, and greet each day by opening their flowers to the sun. A Dollar Tree trellis can turn them into a living wall that gently divides your garden into charming sections. To begin, place 1 or 2 trellises where you'd like the division to be, perhaps between your vegetable patch and your seating area, or along the edge of a patio to create a more intimate corner. Secure them in the ground or in weighted planters for stability. Morning glories are climbing vines, so they'll happily twine themselves through the trellis without much coaxing, but you can help guide the first few stems to get them started. Choose your morning glory colors based on the mood you want to create. Soft blues and purples bring a calm, cool feeling, while bright pinks and reds add a cheerful, festive touch. By midsummer, the trellis will be draped in lush foliage and dotted with blooms that open with the dawn and close as the day warms. I remember the first year I tried this, I placed my morning glory divider between a bench and the rest of the yard. It quickly became my private retreat, a place to sip tea and read without feeling completely hidden, yet just tucked away enough to feel special. One morning, my neighbor peeked over and said she felt like she was looking at a secret garden scene from a storybook. The best part is that morning glories require minimal care once established, making them perfect for gardeners who prefer to spend more time enjoying their space than maintaining it. With each sunrise, your garden will greet you with a new wave of blooms, reminding you that beauty can be both bold and fleeting, and that's part of what makes it so precious. One of my favorite things about the changing seasons is how they bring new opportunities to decorate not just inside the house, but in the garden too. A Dollar Tree trellis can easily be transformed into a cheerful, ever-changing holiday greeting frame that welcomes guests before they even step through the door. Start with a standard trellis, either left in its original finish or painted a versatile color like white gold or deep green. Place it near your front porch garden gate or patio entrance where it will be clearly visible. For each holiday or season, switch out the decorations to match the occasion. In winter, drape it with evergreen garlands, twinkle lights, and a big red bow. For spring, weave in pastel ribbons, faux blossoms, and little wooden bird ornaments. Summer might call for seashell garlands, miniature flags, or sunflower accents, while autumn can shine with orange leaves, burlap bows, and clusters of faux pumpkins. This rotating decor system is not only budget-friendly, but also easy on the hands and back since the trellis stays in place all year. You're simply changing the accessories as the months pass. The process becomes a seasonal ritual, a way of marking time with creativity instead of just a calendar page. One year I decorated my trellis for Christmas with gold bells and soft white lights. A week later, my granddaughter stopped by after school. She stood in front of it eyes wide and said, "It looks like the door to a Christmas fairyland." In that moment, I realized that this little frame was more than just decoration. It was a mood setter, an invitation for joy before anyone even stepped inside. What I love most is that a holiday greeting frame allows you to share a piece of your heart with anyone who passes by. Whether it's neighbors walking their dogs, delivery drivers on a busy day, or friends arriving for a visit, that trellis offers a silent hello, one that changes with the seasons, but always says, "You're welcome here." Sometimes a trellis doesn't need plants at all to make a statement. A few summers ago, I had an old Dollar Tree trellis that was too flimsy for climbing vines, but I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. Instead, I decided to turn it into a piece of outdoor wall art, and it became one of the most commented on parts of my garden. To create your own, start by cleaning the trellis and sanding any rough edges if it's wooden. Choose a color palette that complements your garden, perhaps bright turquoise and sunny yellow for a cheerful pop, or deep teal and copper for a more elegant, weathered look. Acrylic outdoor paint works well, and you can even add stenciled patterns like leaves, flowers, or geometric shapes to the panels. Once painted, mount the trellis against a wall fence or even the side of a shed. You can enhance it by hanging small decorative items in the openings, wine chimes, ceramic tiles, or little mirrors that catch the sunlight. If you're feeling whimsical, weave in strips of fabric or ribbon that flutter in the breeze. I remember one afternoon when a neighbor stopped mid-walk, peering into my yard. "That's gorgeous," she said, pointing to the painted trellis. "It makes your fence look like it belongs in a gallery." I hadn't realized until then how art in the garden can lift the spirit just as much as a bed of flowers. The painted art trellis is perfect for those who want to add beauty without extra maintenance. It's also a wonderful option for shaded spots where plants may not thrive. And the best part is that it can change with your mood, repainted every few years for a fresh start, just like you would with an indoor accent wall. It's a reminder that a garden is not only a place for growth, but also for expression. There's a special kind of joy in creating something in the garden that feels like it was made just for children. Years ago, I wanted a project that would invite my grandkids outside, away from their screens and into a little world of their own. That's when I discovered that a few Dollar Tree trellises arranged just right could become a magical bean teepee. To make one, gather 4 to 6 trellises depending on the size you want. Position them in a circle, leaning each inward so their tops meet at a point, and secure them together with zip ties or soft rope. This creates a tent-like frame that's tall enough for a child to crawl inside. Plant pole beans or even climbing peas around the base, spacing them so they'll eventually cover the entire structure in green. As the vines grow, they weave themselves into walls, and by midsummer, the teepee becomes a shady hideaway. You can place a small blanket or outdoor mat inside so the kids have a comfortable place to sit, read, or snack. If you want to make it even more inviting, hang a few lightweight decorations inside, like paper lanterns or wind chimes. One summer afternoon, I peeked out the kitchen window and saw my 2 granddaughters sitting cross-legged inside the bean teepee, shelling peas into a little bowl and whispering like they were guarding a secret. Later, they told me it felt like their own garden castle. That memory still makes me smile, and it reminded me that sometimes the simplest projects create the richest moments. The beauty of a bean teepee is that it offers both function and fun. The kids get a private little fort, and you get a vertical growing space for vegetables. And even after the season ends, the trellises can be untied and stored flat until it's time to build the castle again next year. Not every garden project needs deep soil or constant watering to shine. In fact, some of the most striking displays come from plants that thrive on neglect. A Dollar Tree trellis paired with a few shallow containers can become a vertical succulent wall that's as low maintenance as it is beautiful. To create one, start by attaching small lightweight planters or repurposed tins to your trellis using sturdy zip ties or metal hooks. Keep them shallow. Succulents don't need deep soil, and make sure there are drainage holes to prevent water from pooling. Fill the containers with a gritty, well-draining mix. Then choose a variety of succulents in different shapes and colors, rosettes of echeveria, trailing strings of pearls, or spiky haworthia for contrast. Position the trellis against a sunny wall or fence, or even prop it on an easel-style frame if you want to move it around. Because succulents grow slowly and need minimal watering, this project is easy on both your schedule and your body. A quick spritz every week or 2 will keep them happy, and in drier climates, they may even bloom with delicate flowers in the summer. One year, I placed my succulent wall on the patio near my favorite chair. Friends who visited couldn't resist running their fingers lightly over the leaves, amazed by the variety of textures. One neighbor called it a quilt made of plants, and I think that description has stuck with me ever since. The succulent wall frame is perfect for anyone who wants garden beauty without the heavy upkeep. It's also a wonderful way to use a trellis in spaces where climbing plants might not thrive, like on a sunny balcony or a small courtyard. Best of all, it proves that a trellis doesn't have to be just a support. It can be the canvas for a living piece of art. There's something grounding about working with materials you've gathered yourself. On slow autumn walks, I often collect fallen branches and twigs, not with any plan in mind, but because I love the way each one tells a story of weather, wind, and time. One day, looking at a stack of them by my shed, I realized they could be woven into a Dollar Tree trellis to create a natural rustic screen that felt right at home in the garden. To make your own, start with a sturdy trellis as the base. Gather twigs and small branches of varying thickness, ideally ones that are already dry. Begin at the bottom of the trellis, weaving the twigs horizontally through the grid, alternating in front and behind each vertical bar. Don't worry about perfect alignment. Part of the charm is the uneven, handcrafted look. As you move upward, tuck in smaller branches to fill any gaps, letting some ends poke out slightly for a more organic feel. If you want extra durability, you can secure a few of the larger twigs with garden wire, though I often leave mine free so they can shift a little with the breeze. The result is a textured backdrop that works beautifully on its own, or as a support for lightweight climbing plants like sweet peas or nasturtiums. One crisp October afternoon, I finished weaving a trellis and leaned it against my fence. The sun was low and the light caught the curves and knots of each branch. My neighbor wandered over, coffee mug in hand, and said it looked like something out of an old countryside painting. That's when I realized I hadn't just made a garden feature, I'd brought a piece of the woods home with me. The rustic twig weave is perfect for adding warmth and texture to your garden without spending a cent. It's also a reminder that beauty often comes from what's already around us, waiting to be noticed and given a second life. Every time I pass mine, I think about the walks that gave me those branches, and the way the garden now holds a little bit of those quiet moments too. Some plants seem happiest when they're allowed to dangle and sway in the breeze, their blooms spilling over the edge like a waterfall. I've always loved hanging baskets, but finding a good spot to display several at once without drilling into walls or buying expensive stands can be tricky. That's when I realized a Dollar Tree trellis could become a vertical hanging basket rack, turning a single frame into a tower of color. To start, choose a trellis tall enough to hold at least 3 baskets at different heights. Anchor it securely in the ground or place it in a large weighted pot to prevent tipping. Using sturdy S-hooks, hang your baskets directly from the trellis grid, spacing them so each one has room to spill outward without crowding the others. This not only keeps your flowers visible from every angle, but also makes watering easier since you can tend to all of them in one place without bending or stretching too much. I like to mix trailing plants like ivy or lobelia with upright bloomers such as geraniums or petunias for a full layered look. In one particularly lush summer, I had a trellis with baskets overflowing in pinks, purples and whites, a vertical rainbow that caught the afternoon light. One afternoon, my friend Margaret came over for iced tea, and as we sat on the patio, she kept glancing at the trellis. Finally, she laughed and said, "That thing looks like it belongs in a magazine." What she didn't know was that the whole setup cost less than a nice dinner out, yet it brought me joy every single day. The hanging basket support is an ideal way to make a big visual impact without taking up much space. And the beauty of using a trellis is that you can rearrange the baskets anytime you want, swap them seasonally, change the color palette, or replace spent blooms with fresh ones. It's a flexible, budget-friendly way to keep your garden looking lively from spring through fall. There are summer days when the sun feels almost too generous, beating down so strongly that even the hardiest plants start to wilt. I learned this the year I planted delicate lettuce in full sun, only to watch it bolt and fade far too soon. That's when I realized a Dollar Tree trellis could be more than decoration. It could be a simple movable frame for shade cloth to protect tender plants. To make one, place your trellis directly into the soil beside your raised bed or container garden. Clip lightweight shade cloth to the trellis with clothespins or binder clips, making sure it's draped loosely enough to allow air to flow, but still shield the plants from direct midday rays. The beauty of this setup is how easy it is to adjust as the sun shifts during the day or as the season changes. You can move the trellis or reclip the cloth without heavy lifting. I remember using this trick during a heat wave when even my tomatoes were starting to curl their leaves. The moment I added the shade cloth, the plants seemed to sigh with relief. Within days, the lettuce leaves were perking back up and the soil stayed cooler and moist for longer. This project works especially well for seniors who want to keep gardening in the height of summer without the extra work of building permanent structures. It's also perfect for protecting young seedlings or shade-loving flowers that can't handle the full blaze of the afternoon sun. One of my neighbors tried it after seeing mine and told me later that it saved her first attempt at growing spinach. "I thought it was all going to shrivel up," she said, "but now I've got enough for salads every week." The shade cloth holder may be one of the simplest trellis projects, but it delivers a powerful reminder sometimes the smallest bit of care can make all the difference between struggling and thriving for plants and people alike. There's something deeply satisfying about combining beauty and comfort in the garden. Years ago, I found an old wooden bench at a yard sale, sturdy but plain. I decided to give it a touch of charm by attaching a Dollar Tree trellis to the back, turning it into a living seat framed with flowers. To create your own, choose a bench that can handle a little modification. Secure the trellis to the backrest using zip ties, brackets, or even heavy-duty staples depending on the material. Position the bench so the trellis faces a sunny or partially sunny spot. Then plant climbing flowers like clematis, black-eyed Susan vine, or even sweet peas at the base. As the plants grow, gently weave the stems through the trellis, creating a floral backdrop that changes with the seasons. The first year I tried this, I chose morning glories. By midsummer, the bench was framed in blue and purple blooms that seemed to open just as I came out with my coffee. Sitting there felt like being inside a garden picture frame, the flowers swaying gently above my head. It became my favorite reading spot, and more than once I caught myself daydreaming instead of turning the pages. This design isn't just pretty, it's also practical. The trellis adds height and privacy to the bench area, making it a cozy retreat. And because the flowers are right behind you, their fragrance drifts naturally around you without having to lean in for a sniff. Friends who visit often make a beeline for the bench, drawn by the way it seems to belong to its own little world. One even joked that it was the VIP seating of my garden. And perhaps it is not because it's grand or expensive, but because it turns a simple moment of sitting into something worth savoring. The trellis bench back is a wonderful reminder that even the most ordinary pieces of furniture can be transformed into something extraordinary with a little imagination and a few blooms. Sometimes the most charming corners of a garden don't lead anywhere at all, they simply invite you to imagine. That's the idea behind turning a Dollar Tree trellis into an upcycled gate illusion. I first tried this when I had a blank section of fence that felt uninspired, and now it's one of the most photographed spots in my yard. Begin by painting your trellis in a color that mimics aged wood or wrought iron. Perhaps a soft, weathered gray, mossy green, or matte black. Mount it against a fence or exterior wall at a height and position that feels like it could be a doorway. To enhance the illusion, you can attach decorative hinges and an old handle found at thrift stores or in your own hardware drawer so it looks like a real garden gate. Plant climbing flowers or vines at the base. Honeysuckle, climbing roses, or clematis work beautifully, and let them weave around the trellis to frame the gate. If you want a touch of whimsy, add a vintage sign or small wreath to the center. One summer, a friend came over and walked straight toward it thinking it might actually open. She laughed when she realized it was purely decorative, then stood there for a long moment saying, "It makes me feel like there's a secret garden just beyond." That's exactly the feeling I hoped it would create. This project is perfect for adding personality to otherwise plain spaces. It doesn't require heavy tools or constant maintenance, and it works in both large gardens and small patios. More than anything, the upcycled gate illusion reminds us that gardens aren't just about what grows, they're about the stories they tell. And sometimes the most delightful story is the one you can step into only in your imagination. Looking back over these 20 trellis transformations, I'm reminded of something my grandmother used to say. A garden is where you put your heart where others can see it. Whether it's a living wall of herbs, a rose arch that welcomes you home, or a whimsical gate that leads nowhere but into your imagination. Each idea is more than a project. It's a piece of yourself made visible. The beauty of using Dollar Tree trellises isn't just in their affordability, it's in their adaptability. They can be elegant or rustic, functional or purely decorative. They can stand proudly in a large yard or quietly in the corner of a balcony. They give us permission to experiment, to repurpose, and to keep adding layers to our space without fear of getting it wrong. I've found that the most memorable trellis projects aren't always the ones that turn out exactly as planned. Sometimes the plants grow in unexpected directions, or the paint fades to a softer shade than you imagined, and yet those little changes become part of the charm. Just like in life, the imperfect parts often hold the most character. If there's one lesson these projects have taught me, it's that creating beauty doesn't require youth, wealth, or perfect conditions. It requires attention, care, and a willingness to look at something ordinary, a simple plastic frame, and see possibility. Your garden will always reflect your hands, your history, and your hope. So, dear friend, which of these ideas speaks to you most? Maybe it's the quiet arch of roses, the laughter-filled bean teepee, or the shimmering wall of fairy lights. Whatever you choose, I hope it brings you joy, sparks your creativity, and gives you a space to rest and dream. Until next time, happy gardening, and may your trellis always lead you somewhere beautiful.